So I will add to the mix a little bit. As is said on Teacher Therapy, a podcast, YouTube, and stuff like this. Put it this way.
Well, Vincent, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And I think you've kind of already answered this question, but in case you haven't, if you had a magic wand and you could change just one thing in education, what would it be?
Yeah, administration. Yeah. If the administration would get on point, I think that would straighten out everything else. Because then they will tell their parents, "Hey, parents, we need your help with your kids." And I think the parents will be like, "Okay, I'm going to start showing more respect to the school administrators and to the teachers." And I really would. That would be the number one thing I would do is with the administration.
Absolutely. That is a very, very common answer. And so I think, there's...
Amen. So, a lot of people, it seems, want to blame teachers. Yes, some of them are to be blamed, but a lot of them are not. It's the things we need to fix are bad administration, bad philosophic principles, and those are the main things. Then how that comes up in like colleges of education. But one thing that needs to happen is to put rational constraints on administration. Some are great, thank you very much. Some teachers are very good, they're great, thank you. Some administrators are very good, they're great, thank you. But not all are. As we know, it's common in business, in education, not just business. So, like, here's one story. Sometime or other, through the decades, I've been teaching somewhere or other. Here's one example of a bad administrator. And this exemplifies how they thought. It's not a one-off incident. This is, as they say, bad administration is common, all too common. Not universal, but common. But, okay, so, in class, I make mistakes, I know a subject well, I get a little careless. Nothing conceptually wrong, but just some like errors here and there. Writing something down wrong because I'm thinking about what I'm going to write next or say next, and accidentally doing some mental math wrong, and teaching some mathematics. But so I make mistakes. I point it out. I say how we should learn from it. Point out that all people make mistakes, and discuss in class how we should live a different environment. We should recognize it's a common thing because of our ancestors. Don't blame it on yourself. It's like our ancestors made us how we are, so accept it. Even real intelligent people, Nobel Prize winners and all that, make mistakes. It's everywhere. It's common. We got to be on the alert for it. So do your work and step back and look at it and assess it for mistakes. I'll talk about that in class. See the exact thing, but it's not just, here's a mistake and we correct it and go on. As if it's a surprise. I work on putting it in context, and turn that volume off. Putting it in context and excuse me, learning lessons from it. Because otherwise, students make mistakes. They think they're dumb. They get stressed. They got to learn that it's a normal part of life, and it's going to be how they deal with it will be very important in their future. Excuse me. So it should be brought up. Learn how to address it. So I do that. Like I say, I make mistakes. I correct them. I talk about making mistakes. I'm talking about thinking skills and habits of mind that we should learn from them, perseverance and all that. Students would come up to the board and work things out. And they would make mistakes, and we'd discuss it calmly and work with it, and again point out, yeah, everybody makes mistakes, big deal. You came up, don't be embarrassed, don't worry about it. And again, some students would come up, it was such a good environment, students would come up, hey, I'm not sure if I have the right answer, but I'll come up and I'll try to work it out. You know they don't know, they're going to make a mistake. They're going to see what they can do. They want to get involved. And I put stuff on the class internet thing about making mistakes. And unfortunately, of course, like a lot of students nowadays, all they care about is their grade. They don't really want to learn how to think, learn good habits of mind, really get an education. Not enough of them. So I'm sure some of that wasn't seen, but I would put up resources about making mistakes, things that people could look at, read, study, how to learn from it, what people have said about making mistakes and improving and all that. So a lot of things like that. And so, of course, what do you think is going to happen? You guessed it. I get called in by the head of school somewhere through the decades, someplace in the United States, and the head of school sits there. You know, I'm sitting there knowing all this stuff, knowing what I do, knowing what I've done through the years, knowing what other people have said. And the head of school actually tells me that a student or students, I forget which, if they use singular or plural, probably plural, aren't comfortable with making mistakes in my class. And the person did this with anger in their voice, and actually said, I need to think hard about my class procedures. You know, and here, where is it? And here's one thing I forgot to read earlier. So here's one thing a student wrote. In, like, you know, through the years, someone wanted me to write a letter of recommendation. So, and then some little thing they sent, it said, quote, Mr. Gold taught us that making mistakes is not failure, but part of learning, which helped me grow both in math and in my confidence. I will always remember that persistence matters more than perfection, period, unquote. Okay, and so the head of the school is going to tell me that I need to think hard about how I deal with mistakes in class. That's you know, so irrational and illogical and wrong. That's what some teachers have to deal with. Critical thinking needs to be imposed on administrators, because this person, head of school, principal, you know, I'm not going to say, but it doesn't matter. The point is the principle going on here. What we need as individuals, what we need as humans, what we need in education. That's the important thing. How are we going to improve this? How are we going to help our children? But the person was gullible. They don't assess evidence or think. They didn't even ask me my thoughts on the matter. I was told. Here, you're talking one professional to another, one human being to another. Yet, a intelligent, reasonable veteran teacher is dismissed as if they know nothing and their opinion is worthless compared to some ignorant, raving child, you know? So there's no canvassing for evidence, no thinking, no processing of the statement. What does a teacher do? What happens in class? This principal or head of school or whoever wasn't even in the class, has never even seen it, never even asked. You know, and that's what a good person would do is think, okay, you call someone in and you don't have a temper tantrum like a little 2-year-old with the fellow professional. The intelligent thing to do would be, hey, let's talk about your teaching here and what you think, and they should go through this as if they're trying to learn. hey, I want to think about how to do better in my class, or I want to see how I can help teachers do better in their classes when they teach. So how do you handle mistakes in your class? What are things you do? And then you can see if a teacher itemizes a bunch of things or what they say, how they can document it, what their reasoning is. And then the principal, head of school, or whoever, administrator, has evidence for what the teacher did. They are asking a question more broadly. They're still focusing on what is relevant, but they get information in a more objective, impartial way from the teacher. There's no accusation first. There's assessing evidence. I don't think you necessarily even have to say, hey, a student said you're bad with mistakes, defend yourself, That's putting a fellow professional on the defensive. That's assuming the other person's right in the first place just because they said something first. Sometimes, but get information, but do it in an objective, impartial way. And get information in the first place. Because, that administrator was gullible, spineless, not capable of critical, logical thinking. As I say, someone who engages in critical, logical thinking is going to canvass for evidence, look for facts, draw conclusions. And part of that comes from talking to the fellow professional, talking to other students in the class, seeing what might be posted on the school or the class website, internet thing, talking to other teachers, to take one raving comment from some student as the whole entire truth is, shows a lack of critical thinking, a lack of care for the truth, a lack of care for fellow professional, a lack of care for people. So again, that's just one example. Just as they say, if he had a magic wand, the thing he would do, change admin, improve it. And as Trish in teacher therapy said, and all the teachers she's interviewed and things, she says that's a very common answer. Lots of administrators, as it came up in another one, one guy said, talked about how administrators are incompetent, a lot of them. And in the interview, kind of talking to teachers, saying, how many times have you been in a situation where someone's assessing you where they're incompetent and they don't know what they're talking about? But look at teacher therapy. I'll post some videos. It's the case. And I assessed evidence too, looking at, talking to other teachers, seeing what's going on. I know what they said about this administrator. I know what people say about administration in general, the good and the bad. But again, there's one example. Again, it's not a one-off thing. And no, I didn't say anything because there's no point in saying something to a person like that when it's like some version of a Salem witch trial. Yeah, this is not the same thing, but get the principles of a Salem witch trial. Essentially what's going on. Okay, yeah, it's not being called a witch and no one's going to be killed, but there's things there that you can draw out from the situation and see how they're similar to others. The basics are, you're being falsely accused of something and people are telling you who they are, how you are. They're not finding evidence or finding out the facts, and then you're being punished for it in some way. You're being told that you're something and treated as if you are and punished. It's like the Salem witch trial principle, we can call it if you want. We don't talk to someone like that. There's no point, so sit there, be calm. It's talking to other people that matters. And if you try to talk to someone like that, no, I'm not a witch. No, I'm not a witch. Yeah, then they consider that as evidence that you are, and they'll come after you more and think you're complaining. You're getting mad. That shows you are a witch and all that or whatever. No point. Irrational, not a context where there's rational discussion. So don't try to engage in rational discussion with a person who's not reasonable like that, you know? So, and again, that shows how we need oversight on some of these administrators. Critical thinking needs to be imposed, but there needs to be oversight on these people, administrators. The good ones already do it. They would like it, then they would have better coworkers. It would be a better work environment overall, and that's what education should do. Education is about teaching reasoning and helping the young develop habits of mind to become good adults. And it should be everywhere. It's not just like teachers, you know. Administrators have to practice it too. It's got to come up in all aspects of the school. So critical thinking, oversight, and that'll help. And again, like I say, it's something like that. It's not an accident. You know, I know the person. Other teachers know the person. I talk to them. It's this integrated perspective and conclusion I have. It's not just out of nowhere also. I've gathered a lot of evidence, assessed a lot of evidence, reasoned this out, known the person, known other things they've done, seen them walking around and how they behave and everything. So I've got boots on the ground and abstract evidence for this, as opposed to being like an armchair person, like someone trying to say something about the situation, knowing nothing about it, except their own make-believe. You know, we need to look at facts, be more Aristotelian, and not get lost in our head. But that situation helps you see someone's cognitive MO, cognitive modus operandi, cognitive method of operation, and moral, and managerial. That's kind of typical, you know, I heard that a lot. But again, we need to work on admin. There's an example of how they are pointing fingers, misrepresenting teachers, accusing teachers of things, being unethical, being dishonest, not sticking to the truth. A lot of factors like that. And that's the kind of thing teachers have to put up with. You know, a lot of them, stuff like that. A little less worse, a little more worse, day by day, year by year. It's not just one little one-off thing. You know, you accumulate that. Then you got all kinds of bad decisions being made by administrators, all kinds of false things, lies. You know, that adds up. Then it affects your pay, your performance reviews, what they're going to do in class observations, how they're going to report it, how you're going to be regarded for the next year, and whether you're put on some alleged improvement plan or not that you actually don't need, you know, all this nonsense. So it's an issue, as I say, affects a lot of teachers in a lot of ways, just like bad managers affect people in the corporate world. You know, think about that. Think about what's going on there. It's not all like, oh, that stuff happens in the corporate world, and it's all like perfection in education, and like teachers are all alone on an island, bunch of nonsense, you know. It's just like the corporate world in some ways when you got a bad manager or someone really running a company poorly and into the ground. But you know, in public education, you got all this public money holding it up, whereas in the corporate world, you know, some really bad manager is going to drive a company into the ground and then it's gone, thank goodness. But you know, unfortunately, it doesn't happen with some high schools or education stuff. You got endowments and public funding and whatever. But you know, that example is common and not everywhere, not universal. It's widespread, but not universal, you know, and it's something that teachers have to deal with far too often. And of course, no reasonable, decent human being is going to want that. You know, you don't want a situation where you're going to be day by day at work frequently, so often in a environment you're in a lot. You're not no decent human being is going to want to be in a situation where you're lied about, you're misrepresented, you're held accountable for things that don't exist, made up things, lies. Other people get away with stuff, but you don't. It's kind of like the witch trial thing. No one wants to be in a little village where they're accused of being a witch, and they don't go around high-fiving other people. Hey, yeah, I'm a witch, thanks. Oh, this is cool. This is always what I always wanted out of life. Nobody, you know? No decent human being wants that. Unless maybe you're undercover or something, Some like undercover reporting operation, whatever. Some unusual situation like that, but it's a typical work environment. No one wants that. It's inappropriate, uncalled for, and needs to be improved. So to improve education, let's work on imposing critical thinking on administrators and developing groups, companies, organizations that give audits and assessments and training to administrators. Audit them for their critical thinking ability, managerial ability to really spot good teachers, help them out, ability to not falsely accuse and all that. Then we're going to take a step towards having a better educational system.